You know, I was about 6 years old the first time a movie genuinely, really scared me. I'm not talking about like hide your face in the couch kind of scared. I'm talking about rearrange the way your brain works scared. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why that is and why I think the year that gave me the movie that did that to me might be the greatest year in horror history. So pop that tape in. I got you. Let's go do this. Now look, every genre has its special year that people point to where things just lined up. The best filmmakers, the best stories, the best effects, whatever, the best cultural moments, it's all there. And I'll tell you right now, with 1984, a lot of you are probably already jumping to the comments saying other years this, other years that. And look, I'll admit that years like 1987, for instance, probably has a deeper bench film for film than 1984, and we're going to do that year along with some of the others that I consider to be the greatest years in horror history, and I'm going to make a real case for each one of them from now through the end of spooky season. But this video isn't necessarily about the deepest bench when we launch this series. This is about a year that did something to me that no other year in the history of horror cinema can do. It is the year that made me the person who is sitting in front of you right now, the guy who grew up and made horror movies. So this thing is going to be part ranking, part argument, and something a little bit more personal at the same time. But I have 10 movies, 1 year, and I am saving the most important one for last because it's not just the best movie on this list. It might just be the reason this channel exists at all. So let's get to it. All right, so coming in at number 10 in 1984 is just some unbridled dread from Stephen King with Children of the Corn. And this is a Stephen King short story that is sort of stretched out, full length, about a small Nebraska town where every adult has been slaughtered by children who now follow a bloodthirsty entity called He Who Walks Behind the Rose. And you've got a young couple who are low on gas and they wander straight into the middle of this. You got Linda Hamilton in here. Outlander! Yeah. She's out. And here's what makes this movie actually work, because it's not really the effects, although there's some pretty damn cool effects in here. They're modest, but like under the dirt, there's some stuff that's really cool by 1984 standards. But the premise is creepy. The children are a threat instead of victims, which is what usually happens in horror movies. Kids are usually the victims. And there's like all of this like cultish fervor to it. It's just kind of overall unsettling. It has a lot of atmosphere to it. Small town, creepy dread, which I love. Stephen King does that wonderfully. And it spawned a bunch of absurd sequels. None of them capture the same magic and the unsettling kind of atmosphere and nature of the original. The original still works because the idea and atmosphere underneath it are much stronger than the budget and what the final product actually was. So Children of the Corn comes in at number 10. Now, number 9, we have another Stephen King movie here, or based on his story, and it's Firestarter. And this is Drew Barrymore, a handful of years, not too long after E.T., playing a little girl with the power to set anything on fire using just her mind. And she's like the product of a government experiment gone wrong. She's hunted by a secret agency who wants to kind of like weaponize her, so to speak. And this is you got Stephen King all over the place in the 80s, man. And this is another one of his. And this has got a interesting story because John Carpenter got fired from this because of the performance of The Thing, believe it or not. So we don't know what Carpenter would have done with this all the way through. But you've got this tension between Drew Barrymore, who's this innocent little girl, but she's got these wicked powers. And you've got George C. Scott in here with he's kind of unsettling because he's the agency's hitman. And this is a little girl that we're talking about. So he's kind of playing against type. He's usually defending, like if you've seen some of his other films. So it's not a perfect film by any stretch of the imagination, but it is somewhat iconic, and the pacing is not that great. And Hollywood never really figured out how to kind of do these psychic power movies the way that they're written in the books. But the idea alone is there, and everyone knows this movie. It has to be on a list from 1984. It comes in at number 9. Now, number 8 might be the one that Joe Bob Briggs loves to say the most, and that's cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers, better known as Chud. And no, I'm not talking about any internet slang for guys like me or any other thing that you want to insult people. Not that Chud. These are cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers, and that's what the title stands for. And more than you know, that's really the whole pitch of this movie. It's toxic waste dumped beneath New York City, and it transforms the homeless population into flesh-eating monsters that just fill the tunnels under the city. And they start to work their way to the surface, as does this toxic sludge. Low budget, grimy practical creature effects on this. A cast that has John Hurd and Daniel Stern in it, believe it or not. And they're probably doing more with the material of this movie than it deserves overall. But what I actually kind of love about this movie, I actually don't own it. I just realized that when I was making this list up. But what I actually like about this movie a lot is all of everything that's underneath the monster suits in this. You've got the neglect, the city abandoning people, all of that. It's kind of smarter than you might give it credit for on the surface, even though it's kind of heavy-handed maybe with that messaging. Those things could get buried, though, underneath practical effects in the 80s, which made them watchable without being, feel like you were being preached to. It's very early 80s, low budget, and you kind of had to sneak it past the studio back in the day to get stuff like this. So Chud has a special place in my heart because of that. It makes the list at number 8. Now, next one is one that has one of my favorite cover arts and posters of all time. It is Silent Night, Deadly Night. And listen, that cover art right there is so cool, man. And I've talked about this one before. This one had a lot of controversy to it. Now, I probably haven't talked about it since last spooky season, but the controversy is sort of the story of the film, because you got a killer in a Santa suit who's murdering people on Christmas Eve, and that's the whole premise, because he's seen something violent in a Santa suit when he was a kid. And when it hit theaters, you had parent groups that organized to get this thing boycotted and pulled out of theaters. Siskel and Ebert read the names of everyone involved in this movie on national television to shame them for making this movie. They condemned them by name. They doxed them back in the day. TriStar pulled the ads for this movie, and within days, it was just gone. But now it's one of the most successful moral panic campaigns ever waged against a horror movie that accidentally probably made more people see it than otherwise would have. Because if you strip away all that outrage from this movie, what you actually have is something that's pretty well made overall for the budget that it had and what it was trying to do. It's an effective killer hook. The story, the setup makes sense from a psychological perspective. A kid traumatized by seeing his parents murdered by Santa, so to speak, a guy in a Santa suit. And then that ultimately becomes his trigger. He's kind of beat on as he's growing up in an orphanage kind of thing. That's real character kind of buried inside this story and this controversy. And you might see this again on controversial lists that I'm cooking up in spooky season, but we're going to leave it here because 1984 didn't just make horror movies, it made movies that kind of terrified a whole culture around them, and that's kind of its own achievement. And you had that with Silent Night, Deadly Night. All right, now for something completely different from 1984. This is a dark fantasy horror, so you might see this again too at some point. But it had to be on this list for 1984. It's The Company of Wolves. And this is Neil Jordan's sort of werewolf, Little Red Riding Hood, fever dream, structured as sort of nested stories throughout a teenage girl's dream, exploring werewolf folklore as a metaphor for adolescence, sexuality, all that kind of always gets tangled up with werewolves. And her whole fear of growing up. You have Angela Carter co-writing the screenplay based on her short stories. This is very terrifying literary horror right here, but gorgeously shot in a dark fantasy way, dense with super dark gothic fairy tale imagery. This is sort of the art house entry on this list if you want to look at it this way. But you had Angela Lansbury in this movie in 1984 as grandma, basically, and it proves something important about 1984, and that's that 1984 wasn't just prolific, it was kind of versatile, because you come out of something like this and then you get Company of Wolves. So in the same 12 months that gave you Company of Wolves and gave you Silent Night, Deadly Night, it gave you Chud. You know, you've got a range here that makes 1984 pretty cool, and this one is kind of special. It is very different. It may not get you the first time, but when it gets you, it's really going to get you, and it's not going to let go with the Company of Wolves. Now, the next one is one of my sneaky favorites. So 80s, just 80s to the max. This actually inspired Joss Whedon to create the movie and then TV series of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That's enough for me. That's my favorite one of my favorite series of all time. It's Night of the Comet. And this is where a comet passes close to Earth, and almost everyone who watches it happen as it passes by gets turned into dust, except for a small number of people who are shielded by steel or concrete at that exact moment. Two Valley Girl sisters wake up the next morning in a nearly empty Los Angeles, and they've both survived, and now the streets are quiet and eerie, and you think they're alone and the last survivors, except there are flesh-eating mutants that this comet also created. And this is one of those movies that probably shouldn't work as well as it does. It's post-apocalyptic horror comedy with an 80s mall aesthetic that is so crazy. You got Catherine Mary Stewart in here, who I always found beautiful when I was a kid and growing up. And you've got Kelly Maroney. So you've got some icons in here. This one has good... they're not scream queen fodder, really, in a way that you might think in the 80s, because it balances their kick-ass ability and this fun 80s tone and like even arcade culture and mall culture, video games. It balances that out with charm and that whole 80s aesthetic that's just awesome. It just suckers me in every single time. It's the movie that on this list, if there was somebody that said, I don't like horror, I don't want to be into horror, what's a good horror to get me into horror that I might like? Night of the Comet is one of those. Fun, weird, smart, under the surface, there's a lot going on, and it is completely perfect for the 1980s. All right, so this next one's going to raise some eyebrows, and I'm going to have to defend this movie. I can tell you right now, because most of you are going to say, this is not even a horror movie, and I'm going to tell you, I disagree with you. It is the Terminator. And now, you got to kind of stop and think about this one a minute before you just react, because I think this is far more of a horror film than people give it credit for. Because you know the plot. You've got Arnold as a cyborg assassin who gets sent back in time to kill Sarah Connor before she can give birth to the future human resistance leader. And you've got Kyle Reese who gets sent back to protect her. And everyone remembers this is one of the greatest action movies, sci-fi action movies ever made. But if you actually look at the bones of this story, a single, silent, relentless monster of a figure, no real dialogue in the first act, just movement, purpose, violence, can't be reasoned with. He is a monster. He walks into the police station and kills nearly everyone without hesitation and no emotion, no flicker of humanity, nothing. And he just keeps coming. No matter what you do, he will not stop coming. Kyle Reese describes it in Sarah with those words directly. It's like they're lifted from a slasher film. This might as well be Jason right here. He says he can't be bargained with, he can't be reasoned with, he doesn't feel pity, no remorse, no fear, and he absolutely will not stop ever until you're dead. That's not an action movie villain. That's Michael Myers with a rifle instead of a kitchen knife. That is Jason with a rifle and a handgun instead of a machete at Camp Crystal Lake. Sarah Connor spends half of this movie running away from the monster, hiding, barely surviving, not fighting through superior firepower, but through the exact same resourcefulness that defines every final girl scream queen in slasher history. James Cameron built this movie on slasher bones, and he dressed it up in chrome and time travel, and it worked so well that nobody really noticed. But he has actually said he was inspired by films like Halloween when he created this. I think it's a mark of genius. It's not a coincidence, especially with him saying that. So I will defend Terminator being on this list. All right, now for one that's lighter, which is weird to say about this, but it's my favorite in this franchise. I think this one, and maybe the newest one, it's tough, but Friday the 13th, the final chapter, I think this is my favorite in the franchise. Friday the 13th, 2009, though, just sitting right over there, these are like 1 and 1A for me. I actually think that one is really great, but I think this one has the best overall sampling of everything that an 80s Friday the 13th movie slasher film actually is. This one has all of that to it. Jason, as was billed, was falsely given many sequels to follow because this was definitely not the final chapter. But you've got Tom Savini, effects legend, who comes back for this one. I talk about this one a lot. You got Corey Feldman. You've got shifting perspectives. You got the perspective of the kid, Corey Feldman, who's a stand-in for Tom Savini, who's all into monsters and things like that. You've got the teens or the college kids out there having a good time, wanting to drink, party, go skinny dipping, have sex, get laid, all of that. This is the introduction. You got Tommy Jarvis here. This thing is got all the pieces. You got the mom's perspective on this. You've got the guy who's out there hunting Jason, trying to protect him. This is one of the coolest movies in this franchise. It samples all the best parts. It came out in 1984. I don't think any of the sequels bothered trying to touch this. I don't think they could get there. It's sharper, it's meaner, it's got more depth to it, it's got more beautiful people in it, it's got the most nudity in the franchise. I did that video if you want to check it out. Went through frame by frame of every movie. This one is the one with the most in it. So if you've ever seen this and dismissed it as a sequel, this is maybe the best one to check out, and it came out in 1984. Now, the next one's kind of different. Coming in at number 2, it's Gremlins. And y'all, Gremlins is a horror movie, but just because everybody knows this one doesn't make it any less of a horror movie. And just because Steven Spielberg was heavily involved and you see that all over this film doesn't make it any less of a horror movie. You've got a small town that gets overran by mischievous monster creatures after a well-meaning gift. We know the story of Gremlins. You've got Gizmo. He gets wet. It creates more gremlins. You feed them after midnight. They become these green, evil bastards that are running around this small town going to destroy Christmas. It might as well be Bedford Falls. It's snowy. It's beautiful. It's got all that Amblin entertainment to it. There's even Rockin' Ricky Rialto on a billboard in here, and he looks like Indiana Jones. All that's there. But this movie's dark. And it had to be cut down. Like, hopefully we get the extended version, because it had to be cut down to not be rated R. And it was one of the... this basically helped cause the MPAA to have to invent PG-13. Steven Spielberg, between this movie and Temple of Doom, pushed them, made a phone call himself. I did that in the History of 1984 video. Explain that, how he helped create PG-13. That's enough to put it on here itself. But you have knife kills, you have blender kills, you have microwave kills, you have the awful story Phoebe Cates tells. This thing is a horror movie wearing light Christmas Spielberg charm to it, and Joe Dante is back there creating a monster film. 1984 created this movie that's super dark, super fun, made for the whole family, and nobody makes movies this way anymore. It had to be on this list. Gremlins. And now, number 1. I was like 6 years old when this first hit video rental stores. Now, it came out in 1984. I didn't see it in 1984. I had to wait on it to get to video rental, and myself, my dad, and my brother, I've told this story, we rented it on VHS. This is the first horror movie that I ever really remember seeing. And I need you to understand, I was 6 years old. I wasn't the sophisticated film guy that's in front of you. I was above average, too deep thinking 6-year-old, and I processed horror movies a completely different way, and it started with A Nightmare on Elm Street. And here's what happened in my head as I watched this movie. As we popped this in on VHS, my brother's like 4 years older than me. I got terrified. I didn't pay attention to, there wasn't as many quips by Freddy back then. I didn't pay attention to any levity in this thing. I was laser focused on a problem that I had. The problem that I had was I could not escape Freddy. No matter what I did, I had to go to sleep at some point. And I wasn't thinking about, oh, was this just confined to Elm Street? I was thinking, this dude can get me if I go to sleep. Now, I understood for sure. I could watch Halloween because I understood that I keep my ass out of Haddonfield, Illinois, and I was probably safe from Michael Myers. And I understood if I kept my ass out of the woods at Crystal Lake, I was probably safe from Jason. However, Freddy could get me anywhere. All I had to do was go to sleep, and eventually I had to go to sleep. And that is what got Never Sleep Again. That was in my head forever. And there is no version of me avoiding this one because you have to go to sleep. You can't stay out of his town. You can't skip the camping trip. Every single night you have to go to sleep, which might bring you face to face with Freddy Krueger for the rest of your life. And if you close your eyes, you're going to picture him in your head, especially as a 6-year-old. All right, so this was like a brilliant white light going off in my mind watching this movie. Like, I can't get away from this guy. Wes Craven was beautiful in what he did here for that reason. He created a monster that exploited everyone's universal vulnerability. It went after you in the place you couldn't avoid, the place that you were supposed to be the safest, the most comfortable, content, when you were asleep in your own bed. And that made this monster terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And then Robert Englund took that character and he rose it to a whole other level. I've told parts of this story many times on this channel. I don't think I've ever told you just how directly that VHS tape rewired how I thought about fear itself as like 6 years old, sitting on the floor with my brother and my dad on the couch behind us. That's why it is my number one. Not just because it's a great movie, because it is without a doubt a great horror film, because it is the single most important moment in terms of horror movies in my childhood that helped ignite my imagination to want to be a horror filmmaker and tell scary stories. Everything I've built on this channel, a lot of the source of horror movies come from this and some other places that we'll get into in some deep stories in spooky season. But all of it, so much of it in a very real sense, can go back to this kid seeing this VHS for the very first time in around 1986 and being absolutely terrified and wanting to never sleep again. So that's 1984. Slashers, mutants, werewolves, monsters that will haunt your dreams forever. I told you that 1987 might top it, and it might. We're going to get there. It's got a deeper lineup. We will take a look at it soon, as this is just the first in this series. But I want you to tell me in the comments what you think. This one means more to me because no other year did what this one did, sitting on that living room floor with that haunted Nightmare on Elm Street VHS tape popping in. Let me know in the comments what are some of your favorite years, and maybe it's going to be in this series, and you'll see when we get to it. But until next time, like, hype, subscribe, all that good stuff that helps out the channel as we get ready for spooky season, our biggest time of year, spooky season, Christmas season. It is all coming, my favorite time of year. I'm so excited to share it with you. If you'd like to do a little bit more, my Patreon link is in every description. You'll get your name on every video, special members only videos, all my past live streams, everything in there, and it all helps the channel, and I really do appreciate it. But until next time, be kind, rewind like always. This is Chase with AV Pop Culture, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye. I know.